once Melanie became critically ill from terminal cancer. To be brutally honest, every day I had to fight the urge not to simply walk away, but to live our best life in my precious soulmate's fight against the darkness of her disease. As a primary caregiver, most of the people in your world, they devote their energy to supporting your loved one in their fight. But what about your fight? Who cares for the carer? Every day is a miracle. Every day is an unpaid bill. With a little help from some fellow carers, I'm starting this Every Day's a Miracle forum, specifically for carers, educators, general well-being. Please join me on Sunday to listen, share, connect in a bi-monthly series of online events where I'll relate my journey as a carer. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Anton. I wasn't expecting that intro to be playing again. My experience as a caregiver as a husband caregiver is my baseline in creating this community forum, help resource, and an access to knowledge for caregivers. And today I'm very, very lucky to have a professional caregiver on board who's passionate and empathetic as a caregiver. And because last time when we met, it was clear to me that there's a paradigm shift between a carer of a loved one and then a professional carer for somebody that's maybe not so lovable or known to the carer. Today is our official first episode, and we're going to be talking about misconceptions in caregiving. This is an 8-part series that I'm presenting. I'll give an overview at the end of today, but we're looking at what caring is, support for caregivers, and that's what else did I need to introduce? The one point I wanted to make is that my knowledge is based on largely on my Melanie's handling of the disease herself, with me as a support of that. And everything I know is based on what the structure that she put in place that I supported. And as such, I'm aiming to pass that structure and knowledge on as part of me keeping her alive. Because I'm sure that everybody that's been a caregiver can write a textbook, as I have done, on how to be a carer. However, it's not about the knowledge as much as it is about, applying it and being effective and avoiding burnout and still remaining a human being at the end of the day. So I want to just bring everybody in. Thank you very much to Gino, who's also here looking. Let me just get you in. If I can get you in. There's CJ. How did you, CJ?
Hello.
CJ is today's professional caregiver. I'm hoping to get somebody on every time. And CJ is trained in Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha, and at Netcare, and he is a professional caregiver in a wide range of hospitals and income groups and cross culture, across race, across all of those. He's had experience of all of those. CJ, how long? Just by the way, how long have you been a carer? Professional caregiver?
About 6 years now.
Oh wow! So you've definitely got an insight on how to avoid caregiving. I just want to introduce everybody else. Lizelle is here today. Lizelle Petzer. She is a caregiver of her late husband Matthew, and she's a cancer survivor herself, and she's got an amazing story to tell about the romance that has seen her through, and is still doing so. And then welcome, Lizelle.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. And then Tracy, my number one friend and major support system while I was a caregiver. I'm not currently a caregiver because I don't know if I can actually face doing it again. And I have the greatest respect for those. But Tracy saw me through that as a friend of ours and remaining a friend. So she's very familiar with all of the 8 sections of this program that I want to present, including how to deal with loss as the final section. So I want to kick off with asking CJ, since he could probably put it in a box easiest. When I throw and I'm going to throw this at CJ first, because when you throw it at somebody that's like me, what are misconceptions about being a caregiver? I'd have to think about it. And obviously my first thought would be like, well, you can't do it, or you can do it. CJ, what would you say is like the most obvious misconception about let's get you live? Misconceptions about being a caregiver.
Yeah. So I think as soon as somebody hears the word palliative care, meaning end of life care, they think, oh, we're just getting this person ready for death. But that's often not the case. It's about improving their quality of life and making sure that whatever time they have left, that we can, optimize that time and make them experience and enjoy what little bit of life they have left. So a lot of people think, palliative care or end of life care is just about, getting them ready for death, but that's not the case. It's about, like I said, creating an environment where they can, like you said in your intro, live their best life. And I think and this is a very nice series we've got here, because we often direct all of our attention towards the patient and the person we're looking after, and often we forget about ourselves. And you can't be a good caregiver towards somebody else if you don't take care of yourself. I think that's probably one of the most, at least in my line of work, one of the biggest things that I've seen is as soon as somebody starts hearing the word, cancer or any sort of end of life disease, and they think, oh, okay, we just need to get them ready for the end. And that's not the case. And the other thing is, people think grief only starts once the loss has occurred, which is not the case. You start grieving that person from the day that you find out, and people sort of put those emotions and feelings at the back of their head because they think, oh no, we still have this person here. But that's not the case. The grieving process starts when you get that diagnosis or you get that information that sort of sets the trajectory for end of life environment or situation.
For me, the difficult part was actually not asking my Melanie to actually feel sorry for my grief, because as a partner, you normally share each other's grief. I know that Lizelle has got many similar aspects to her experiences with her story, and she's still grieving for Matthew, her husband. Lizelle, did you find yourself stronger or weaker for going into caring for Matthew?
Actually both. I had to be strong for both of us. I had to make sure that he knows that he's not alone. So it wasn't easy at all.
Did you think
it was a tough road?
You knew, like I did, that you were getting into into a room with 3 of you and the illness and that. So you knew that. So but it wasn't it wasn't the intense grief that one gets when you first get diagnosed, or your loved one gets first diagnosed. For you guys were both. Can you tell us how you met Matthew?
I met Matthew at hospital at Livingston, and I had to go for a booking for operation. I knew that I had stage 4 thyroid cancer, follicular cancer, and he didn't know that he had cancer at that stage. And that's how we met. He stared me down that whole day.
Yes,
Both of us were very, very sick.
he followed you
Yeah,
around. He followed you
yeah.
around, and then
Yes,
you got into.
he stared. Yo, I was annoyed with him in the
And then you.
beginning, but we ended up married.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Um, so you went into everything with your eyes open, and it wasn't in a stage of
yes.
grief that you became hitched. And in my own story, it's similar. Um, um, but I want to just come back to. Uh, I can't throw this question at Lizelle because I wouldn't know how to answer it myself. I still don't. You, as a pro, Tracy, don't get lonely there. We will come to you shortly. And the preparation one must do as a caregiver, emotionally. How do you? And I'm asking CJ this. How would you get caregivers to prepare emotionally for their role? I mean, this is such a nasty question if you asked it of me. But if you are somebody that is working with somebody that's ill all the time, you must need to go through certain routines. Maybe you
Yes.
have a spiritual side or a religious, practice. I don't know. What would you do?
Yeah, I think one of the, and we get taught this in nursing school, is that you have to acknowledge your own emotions. We often tend to be outshadowed by the situation, and we tend to forget to process and acknowledge our own feelings. And if you don't do that, you're like, oh, okay, so yes, the situation's busy happening, and I'm going to be the primary caregiver for this person. And how do I feel about that? How is this affecting my emotions? And I think just a very simple exercise that they taught us in nursing school was, if something traumatic occurs, go home, stand in front of the mirror, and be like, okay, what are these emotions I'm feeling? And give them names. Tell them this. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling frustration. Because if you verbalize those emotions, you tend to process them much easier. And yeah, is a situation making me anxious? And I think once you have identified and named those emotions for the thing, whatever you are feeling, it's much easier to come up with a game plan on how to manage it. And one of the things you can do is you have to have a support system. I think when people get into the situation, they tend to isolate themselves and think, they can't always reach out. And it's absolutely beautiful that you had Tracy during your journey, because yeah, it's difficult to handle and do all of these things alone, and you just sometimes need to have somebody from the outside come in and say, but listen, are you okay? Are you processing the situation? How are you feeling? And having that
Yes.
support system, because you are the support system for your loved one, and having a support system of your own just
Yes.
makes it a bit easier.
Yes. Tracy was a massive part. In fact, she coordinated the support system around, as we formed a circle, and it was very amazing. And it was very easy to find a flow on that for me and to be directed. One of the challenges is that I don't, and I'm so pleased that you're on, because the male experience is not the same. I'll get back to that just now, but I was a lot of my male friends showed a different side that I didn't expect. I got support from some, and I didn't get support from others that I expected it. But with my female colleagues from work and Melanie's female friends, it was very much easier to get the support I needed. To be able to give the physical support to Melanie. But there were people that, like Tracy, that contributed emotionally and materially as well, which is another challenge I'm going to get to in another part, which is how to deal with the financial challenge, legal challenges of things. That's all part of what I'm talking to throughout this. series, but today talking about misconceptions about caring and what it actually is. Tracy, you were not only a massive support to me and to Melanie, but you also were part of Melanie's will to live. And as such, you were a friend that was removed from the. You were friends aside from the fact she was ill. You transacted as friends do. Not so. Uh, I have a. I should.
Well,
It's a yes or no question. I should actually give you a more open-ended one.
she insisted on that, and it was it was important for Mel. Yes, I could see that, but I think it was important for me too because, I asked you last week, what does care look like for the caregiver? And what was great was that you're a very vocal person, Anton, and it's great because you make no bones about what you need. And Melanie was like that as well. She said to me, Tracy, I need adventure.
Yeah, adventure. Yes.
And if I was able to give her adventure, then we would have adventures because she was saying it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just Mel feeling. Yeah. But it was a large part of that was for you, to give you that
respite.
She's okay, she's happy moment, and that was part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing that giving the carer a break and arranging that the carer gets a break, or the carer arranging themselves to get a break. Like CJ was saying, go to the mirror, acknowledge the emotions. That's so inspiring that that's actually part of nursing training or caregiver training. CJ,
I like that.
Yeah, because I don't know how honestly one deals with emotions if you're dealing with loved ones you don't necessarily love. So critically ill people you don't necessarily love. I'm going to come back to that question, CJ. But one of the things I wanted to just get another response from you on, Tracy. It's not so much about fixing problems. Sometimes it's simply about listening to them. I often had the experience to come home and Mel had a terrible day, from the point of view of suffering and how she tried. And it was difficult for me to get home from school in a state of that circus and then listen straight away. And I found myself running to social media, which made her very upset because I wasn't listening properly. So she was a fantastic communicator. So she allowed, and we had a very good relationship. So she said, well, let's just let you land for an hour before I tell you about my day. Or you tell me about what happened with you and you get it off your chest and then you keep quiet and I listen, you listen to me. And we negotiated that way of conversing. So I didn't get home because I always rushed home. I didn't go to the pub or if we were going home. I wanted to be with her, but then when I got home, it was like really she'd had a bad day and she needed to tell me and I needed to listen because there was nothing to fix. And fixing and listening is very distinct. Tracy, you and Mel had a relationship where you were listening to each other aside from you had a normal transactional friend relationship where you dealt with life's problems and over life's experiences. And as I say, that gave her a will to live. And more than any support for me, that was such a nice thing to know that you were she was actually being useful by being a listener to other people and listening to other people's stories. And well, I think I'm thanking you for that, but I don't actually know if there's a question in what I'm saying. Question for me, maybe, Tracy. Straighten me out there. Otherwise I'll have to. Okay, I'm going to come back to you because I've now made you cry. I'm good at that. I make learners cry all the time. Lizelle, with regard, one of the incentivizing, in other words, putting things in front of you that make you live life worth living, special moments, adventures. You and Matthew, you organized Matthew's adventures. Can you tell us about that one of them? There's one of that I remember very distinctly you telling me about, which is amazing, and actually it's extremely funny. But I don't know if I don't know if you would be prepared to share the bucket list.
Yeah. No. Yeah, he had a bucket list, and he said we weren't married at that time. One of the bucket list was to get married and have a family with my daughters, and yeah, we got married. He called my daughters his daughters, not Lizelle's daughters or my stepdaughters. He called them his daughters. And he would tell me he wants to go places. We would wake up and he would just say, I want to go to East London, or I just want to go for a road trip. Then I take him because I know that's the only chance that he will get. And we end up in Knysna, and we went to his family in East London to visit there. It was just an hour lunch. And that's the first time that I met him. And yeah, I made sure that he gets everything, all his wishes come true.
Yes.
It was very important to me.
He had a particular wish about wanting to get married. He had which you got right. He had a particular. You said to me it was the best year of along many years, but you also said to me there was a bucket list item which proved to be almost impossible, but you did it anyway. The one involved going to put feet in the water, and the other one involved going to go fishing.
Yeah.
Both which proved to be very difficult for a rather obvious reason that wasn't considered. Can you tell us?
Yeah, this is actually funny. He said to me that he wants to go put his feet in the water. And I thought to myself, but how is he going to do it? They amputated his leg to stop the cancer, but unfortunately it spread to his lungs and stuff. And I said, okay, we can take you. And he wanted to fish off the rocks. And I said, but how are you going to get there? He said, no, we're going to get there. And he was adamant to go fish off the rocks. I said, love, how are you going to get to the rocks? You only have one leg. He said, oh, I didn't think of that. So yeah, we made a lot of jokes with his stompy and stuff. It was amazing. Even though he was so sick and in so much pain, we still laughed and made fun, and he was just an amazing man.
And there's so few of those. There are so few of those moments, but those moments bring out everything of the person and everything of your time together with that person, and it's those moments that keeps one alive forever, I think, even when the person's gone.
He was amazing.
I still think that it was like he decided he wanted to chase you and he wanted to marry you, but it wasn't creepy in any way. You told me that it was very, very very in a very proper romantic way.
He actually asked my youngest daughter. Yeah, he asked my youngest daughter for my hand. He wanted to do it the right way.
Wow, yeah.
So he asked her, is it okay if he can marry me?
Yeah. Yeah, he did everything by the book. Wow. I know
Yeah.
that Tracy arranged our wedding, and it was a wedding from heaven, all in black, as we wanted it. CJ, coming back to you've been educated and trained as a professional, and you did it through basically real school. You actually went to a college. What resources would you suggest caregivers educate themselves? And there's a whole book of questions I have about this, but let me just put that one to you for starters, before I frame my next question about this. What resources would you suggest to educate, to get knowledge?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to be living in the century or in the time that we do, because we have access to the internet, and it can be a bit of a slippery slope, going onto the internet, and googling diseases and things, because people they tend to make up their own stories and their own opinions. But I think going onto the internet and finding resources that are peer reviewed, that are actually scientific. And I actually made a smaller list of, I don't know, maybe add it afterwards if you'd like. But
yes,
there's
please.
the National Institute of Health, which has a very nice little, you can put a disease in there. It will tell you there's a disease progress, the symptoms, what to expect, all of those kind of things. The Mayo Clinic also has a fantastic website that offers a lot of information, and the Medline Plus. So there's a whole list of websites where you can go to, and obviously just books as well. Like we had some fantastic books. There's I don't know if you know the For Dummies series. It's Mathematics for Dummies, or
for Dummies.
I'll see if I can find it, but somebody came up with a book very similar to that. So it's called Cancer for Dummies, and it's just sort of a very whimsical little book that explains to you what to expect and what to do and all of those kind of things. And it was quite a beautiful thing, I thought, to have. So we have a lot of resources online, and I think the most important part in managing your own fear and anxiety is to become knowledgeable, and if you know what to expect when it happens, it's then like, I remember this is going to happen, and you tend to work through it and process and manage it a lot better if you have that prior knowledge.
Yeah, that is a bit of a touch. I wouldn't say catch-22, but that's a bit of a. In Old English, you say there's the rub. You don't really want to know about this stuff until you do. If I knew more about it, I might have run away. Most men actually do abandon their partners, according to a study. Well, not most men, but the men are 6 times more likely. So in probability, and I've got to a point in my life where I don't judge anybody for doing, people respond very differently, and they got to do what they got to do. Fight, flight, or freeze. They must just do it and deal. I dealt, but I'm a natural coward. So, and people must do what they need to do to survive. But your response is, it is alarming, that probability that men are likely to run. And if I knew more about it, if I'd read Cancer for Dummies, I might have actually run. Okay, Tracy.
I think it's also about taking into consideration your own, knowing yourself. I mean, for me, for example, if as soon as something, if I think, like for instance, my mom had cancer about 6-7 years ago, when I initially just finished or started towards the end of my training, and I must honestly tell you, she got quite sick. She had laryngeal throat cancer, and every bit of knowledge that I have received throughout my training went out my head the moment she collapsed on the bathroom floor. And I stood there and I'm like, what now? You know, what do I do now? So yeah, I suppose in an ideal world, you know, making yourself very knowledgeable is the best thing to do. But yeah, you don't know how you're going to react until you get into that situation. And yeah, I mean, very, very, very true story that men often, I think it's because, you know, the society has created this image that men are not emotional beings. We are these strong, closed off, you know, can't show vulnerability, and put us into a little box. And I think as soon as we break out of that box and you become like, oh, listen, yeah, we are emotional beings. We know how to care. We know how to love. We know how to be. Yeah, we can potentially grow a bit there.
Yeah, we're not. But we're also fixers. We want to fix everything. My most empathetic friend of all, and of all my friends, is a deep empath. If that is a real thing, apparently. But he was actually more interested in fixing things. You need this. Let me do that.
Yeah.
There's the last thing I need. Everything's found. Everything's fixed. There's nothing you can fix. And then other men that I'm friends were natural fixers in life, and they were understood what I needed was to just speak and listen.
Yeah.
And there's no suggestions. It's just basically you needed to have somebody to talk to acknowledge it back, and you don't find that so easily in a man's world because you know men are hardwired to be fixers. And fixing your repressed emotions to deal with fixing, and then you deal with the emotions later. There's no one there. Yeah. That's essentially. I'm so fortunate I had that. I am so fortunate in my journey as a carer. When I talk to people that are doing it, especially for their parents, and it's absolutely like a second, seventh hell for them. And I really am so blessed in what I had to deal with and the friends I had. So if I could replicate that for everybody, I would be so happy. Lee, okay, just coming back to you, we dealt with a humorous instance of with regard you and Matthew. One of the things I've got planned is, as well as CJ mentioning those books, I'm going to post those up, and I'm going to get them posted up, and I'm going to get talking about fixing. I have PDF versions of making a basic schedule for meds that I did, making low residue meals, something you have to learn about when people have got ill. You have to learn. I didn't know what that was, but I had to learn very quickly on how to prepare those. And I'm sure that's very much part of CJ's everyday work. But Lee, what was something you had to learn that you didn't know before or didn't expect to see coming for Matthew?
Well, yeah, I'm here.
Something you had to learn.
Yeah, it was difficult. Yeah, I had to learn to be there for him constantly. I had to be his pillar, and also.
Is there a specific thing that you had to do, like because I mean you're a contractor. You actually work in a man's world on site with installations and fire prevention. So having to care for somebody is perhaps not something you ever to do. What particular skill did you have to learn? Did you have to revisit? I had to learn how to prepare meals for somebody that wasn't interested in eating. And I had to really learn how to do that.
Yeah, that was difficult. That was that was challenging to get him to eat healthy stuff, and especially at the end. Like I said, you mustn't force him to eat because that's the way their body is starting to shut down. And I just wanted him to have some shakes, like Herbalife shakes, so he can have all the necessary vitamins and minerals in his body, which he didn't want to take. And yeah, it was difficult food-wise to get him to eat something or get something in his system.
Okay. So, any surprises? Anything you wished you knew before you were in that situation, or
yeah, especially with the end of life, I wish I could have known more to expect, so I could have dealt with it maybe in a better way than what I did. I know I did everything I could for him, but I think
that's such a good one. I wasn't ready for that either.
Could have done something better,
Okay.
And the thing is, he also wanted me with him the whole time, and I deal with my business. I had to put it aside to take care of him, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy road, but I did it because I loved him.
Yeah, and if you, I want to just move on to communication and talking. Again, I was very lucky. I had somebody that I could communicate very well with. But CJ, when you've got to foster, sorry to jump forward, Lee, I'm going to come back there. When you've got to communication strategies, how do you communicate effectively with patients, between caregivers and patients? Is there, what are common problems there? I'm sure.
So
you've had lots of problem patients.
Yeah. I think the most important thing to remember is it's not you versus the patient. I often tell my colleagues, when patients are in hospital, they don't want to be there. It's not a normal situation. It's not a natural thing. And that alone already sparks feelings of aggression, anxiety, and, all of those things. And people often don't know how to process those emotions. So I think it's very important for me as a caregiver, when I encounter a difficult patient, or I find somebody who is irritable or tends to be a bit nasty, I just take a step back and I'm like, okay, why is this person reacting the way that they are? And I try to have a bit more insight into what they are feeling instead of just reacting, because we tend to do that quite often. A taxi swerves in front of us and we're like, we shout them, or we find situations where we are very emotional or respond emotionally first. And often, like I said, when I find a difficult patient, I just take a step back. I take a breath, and then I try to get to what the actual issue is, or is. Because often patients are they're fearful, they're scared, they don't want to be there. It's the fear of the unknown. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know what is the end going to be like. And I think the most important first step is just realizing that. And it's such a it sounds so simple, but it's so powerful. Just realizing the struggle and the battle that they are in and they are busy fighting is going to make a huge difference in how you communicate with this person.
Right. And Tracy, are you still with us? Tracy's having a hell of a time with her internet today. Okay. But if I was to ask you, moving on to caregiver burnout again, there are a lot of misconceptions about what burnout is. There's symptoms for it. I think, but when it comes to carer burnout, I didn't burn out. I took steps to avoid carer burnout, but what does it look like when this starts to happen from your side? I mean, you must have seen a lot of professionals start to burn out. And of course, now you're committed to this vocation, this job, this person, and now you kind of they're burning up and you're burning out, for want of a better way of putting it. What does that look like, and how does it go better, not worse?
The thing is, burnout is such a tricky, because everybody experiences it differently. And there are some set signs and symptoms and things you can look for, but to be very often, you don't recognize it up until you're in the eye of the storm. Because, we are so driven. We have cortisol and all sorts of hormones and things running when we're in stressful situations. And as soon as those take a dip and they crash, that's when you start to feel like, oh, yes, I'm really, really exhausted. But I think one of the most, I've experienced burnout at least once in my career. And a bit of my experience was during COVID. And it was one of the most horrible things that I've ever experienced in my entire career and in my personal life. And I just saw death every day, all the time. And people were diminished to a little bag that they were put into. And I think that was always the worst part of me. There's, and I said to myself, and one of my colleagues also said to me, the day that you zip the body bag and you don't feel anything, that's a day that you need a break. And that happened to me, and that happened to me, and I zipped, and I was like, I don't feel it. There's a lack of empathy, there's a lack of emotion, and I was like, I'm burnt out. I need a break. But burnout, like I said, comes in different waves and forms, and it looks differently to each person. But lack of empathy, lack of emotion towards the person you're looking after, or just in general, irritability. You start questioning life and the choices you've made, and you feel life helpless, and all of those emotions start to surface to your head. And those are definitely some very good signs that you are being burnt out, or that you are tired. So I think as somebody who's taking care of somebody else, you need to prioritize your own well-being, your own rest as well. Because like I said previously, you tend to get into the cycle, and then you can't really be an effective carer then anymore.
This is a huge part of my next question, which is probably central to the whole aim of this initiative. Now, you talk about taking a step back when you're in a situation with a difficult, angry patient. You're talking about taking a step back to now avoid. Well, say you're burnt out. Now you're going to take a step back to recover. Okay, so how does that look? And what do you do in terms of counseling, in terms of anxiety reduction, medication if need be, upskilling? Would you what part of all of how does that all fit in? Counseling, medication, time off, taking a bit less time, and then also maybe getting more knowledge. How does that? Is that a component? Can you confirm that? Can you comment on that?
Yes, no, definitely. I think one of the most important sort of tools to combat burnout is taking time. Taking time to process whatever it is that you're feeling, seeking help, finding somebody that can help you. Like I went and I saw a psychologist, which has been absolutely fantastic, because I think you get in this rut of you don't know how to process your emotions, and sometimes you alone speaking to a friend doesn't always help. You need somebody with specific training and knowledge to sort of take all of this mess that's going on inside your head and put it into something that's understandable and processable for you.
Yes.
And taking time and doing things that you enjoy to sort of find the purpose of your happiness again, going out into the garden or listening to some music, or going on vacation to somewhere where there's no internet. All of those things slowly but surely recharge. And I think one of the most, the things that happen often is we sort of think, we just need a few days. We just need a day or two just to recuperate and sort of get our energy levels back up again. But a day or two is not going to help. You need at least 2 weeks of consistent rest after you have a confirmed burnout scenario or situation, because it's only after the first week that all of those stress hormones start to come down, and that following week is just to get back into a normal healthy pattern and cycle or behavior again.
I've got that's something that you've hit on there, which sounds so glib, but it's so much central to finding a will to live, is doing things that you like. That is much more to that than just saying that. You're really talking about making that your own, making that like a quest, like doing things you like. But in terms of looking at, I've got a list of things you might look at to avoid burnout, and you've mentioned pretty much all of them. Emotional support, counseling, getting a break, support groups, time management, and organization training. That's sounds. Do you is there anything that's dedicated to carers or nurses or health professionals when it comes to organizational training that's dedicated to your work that you would be able to sort of embark on while you were having a sabbatical or a rest period? What would that be? What form would that take?
Yeah, so the current hospital that I work at, and actually all of the hospitals that I've been to before, they have a very great system whereby they have counselors available to you, and it's a whole range of support systems that they offer. So financial management, psychologists, life counselors. So there's a whole set of resources that's available to us at the hospital. It's the one that I'm working with now, or that we have at our hospital, is called the iCare system. And essentially all that happens is you give them a phone call, you tell them, you speak to a consultant, and they'll tell you, okay, what's the problem? Listen, I'm struggling a bit with this, and they will direct you then to the appropriate people. And then they sort of make contact with you, and it's absolutely free. Everybody that works in the hospital has access to it, and you can then go and get help or counseling for whatever problem it is that you might have. If it is legal, whether it's financial, whether it's planning, organization, whether it's time management, whether it's a loss of a patient, grief of a family member. So that's a fantastic system, and it's actually quite shocking how little of the healthcare workers make use of it.
You said it's called iCare. Is that dedicated to Netcare's story, or is that like something that is like or what is that? Is it like
it's
no,
it's an independent organization that's being outsourced by the different companies and hospitals, and it's called iCares. I'm not sure if it is open to the public. I can find out. I'll just let you know.
Sorry, how does it? iCares.
iCAS, ICAS.
Okay, right. So it's a private organization that you can hire for your hospital.
I'm not really 100% sure if it's to the public. Yeah.
Just a matter of interest. Is that in the South African state hospitals as well, or just? You don't know. Doesn't matter.
No, I think that's only in the private hospital. I think the state hospitals, as far as they have an employee wellness center that is equipped with psychologists and their own team of experts that help staff. But I'm not too familiar with that.
Okay. You obviously you exercise yourself as
I try to.
that was a huge part of my care journey is making sure. Well, my Melanie was a Springbok athlete, swimmer, so she was from a young age trained in that wellness, and she kept that going into her life. She survived the cancer for 2 years more than she might have because of that, I'm sure. But we had to. I've got a whole section on how we got it right that she could exercise just around things she liked, like getting up in the morning to go and have a smoke. Forced to get her need to have nicotine actually forced her to get out of bed. And if it hadn't been for that nicotine need, she wouldn't have got out of bed especially towards the end. Exercise. You spoke about cortisol earlier. Can you just elaborate a bit about that? Because not everybody knows about cortisol and hormones and happy hormones and unhappy hormones. I think cortisol is an unhappy hormone, but I mean, it's just one of them that we have to live with. What's that? What's cortisol?
It's known as the stress hormone, and it's often gets released when we are, either in emotional, duress, stress. And it's not a very great thing to have in your system, because I can get into the deep, but it's you get all of these hormone releases that are not very good for you. It increases your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, it delays things like wound healing, it messes with other things like your psychological and emotional.
It's terrible, but it does have a purpose. It does have a purpose being there. I think it makes you be able to deal with the situation.
Yes.
Although the aftermath and apparently exercise is one of the best ways of getting rid of it.
Yes. I think one of the most important things is, we should get back to the basics, which is things like lifestyle, exercise, what we eat, because we're saying, for me, great example is, I work long hours, and often, when you get home, you're so tired, you don't feel like cooking, so you grab takeaways or you grab, whatever is easiest, and you get into a cycle of unhealthy living, and you don't realize how much that impacts your emotional state and your psychological well-being if you are not physically and physically healthy. And I think physical exercise, diet, all of those things are fantastic tools to help combat stress and anxiety and emotional stress.
I think for most of us, I think Lee can concur with us too. We don't, us wage slaves, like teachers and site workers, like teachers only, we don't get out much. So the exercise we get is running around a school or running around a building site or a installation. But I have found is good enough. I mean, it's enough. It's not enough, but it's something. Actually. Lee, I want to come back to you. What aside, you spoke about Matthew's going to going to Knysna a lot. So there was a lot of traveling. What if you had to focus on if you can remember, if you can recollect, just if you can pick out parts of the story, what actually were activities that promoted him moving around as much as he could, that made him tired, that he said, look, I'm tired and I'm sore now, but it was tired and sore in a good way after moving around as much as he could. What were those activities for you and him?
Yeah, it was, at the end, it was quite exhausting to do the things that he wanted to do. But before,
when he was still able to laugh.
Yeah, we would go like to Knysna. We even took the kids with, and
Yes.
you would want to explore the fishing places and stuff, and getting out of the vehicle. It was very exhausting for him, but yet he still wanted to do all those things
So
in his capacity.
he was driven by the desire to go and get there with all his thoughts and all his
Yeah,
emotions and as well. So that drove him to actually move, which of course would have reduced the
yeah.
cortisol from the stress of the pain. I'm going to go back to CJ just now and ask him, because that's something that's a huge deal, that you're constantly in pain all the time. And your cortisol level, because of that, your cortisol level is always much, well, I don't know if it's higher. I'm not a doctor, but it's very high because you're constantly in pain. CJ, can you elaborate about that? Prolonged pain.
Yeah. It's very, very difficult with when it comes to pain management in terminally ill patients. It's just finding out what works for them. For some people, physical exercise will work. For some people, need to be heavily medicated. In the hospital, we often find that we tend to go towards the medication side of things.
Yeah.
There are some fantastic medications available for end-of-life care. One of them is something called mist morphine. I don't know if you are familiar with it. So it's essentially a opiate morphine, which is helps for pain, and it's in the form of.
I'm just going to cut into CJ. Sorry, no, it wasn't specifically the medications. My question to you wasn't specifically about the medications. It was the just maybe a better medical insight than I have or we have about exercise in relation to reducing cortisol, which is escalated in patients who are under pain all the time. So, I mean, a lot of the patients are in pain despite being heavily medicated. But what I'm directing you towards is to explain how the exercise would still help despite that, because after medication you've still got pain and discomfort, but that's mostly because the cortisol level escalates. You're in pain all the time. In pain all the time. So you're constantly going to be producing more and more cortisol. I don't know if there's a medication to reduce the cortisol. I don't know, but I know that exercise does, and that's what I was wanting you to. Am I correct? Is there a better way to explain?
Oh, yeah. So cortisol definitely gets released in the body when you're experiencing pain. So pain increases stress, and stress then makes the adrenal glands, which are the slight little things on top of your kidneys, and they are the guys that produce cortisol into the bloodstream. And like we mentioned, cortisol is not the greatest of things to have in high levels in your body. It's important, but if it's in excess, it can cause things like high blood pressure, diabetes, and all sorts of funny things. And exercise is definitely one of the ways that you can combat that. So get physically moving around the muscles. There's a whole way of how it gets moved out of the body through exercise. But it's definitely, and especially if you're in pain, you don't often want to move. You don't want to do the exercise.
No, definitely you don't. You definitely don't, especially if you're thrown in the towel and you want to die, which is not an experience I had, but I know that that's quite common. I don't know, probably even if I was cancer, again, you never know how you're going to react, but maybe if I had cancer, I would just throw in the towel and want to go. And if you want me to exercise, I wouldn't. But if you could get me to do it around things I liked, I think then you'd be doing me a favor.
Yeah. And I mean cortisol as well. It causes it messes with your sleep-wake cycle as well. So you often then struggle to sleep as well. And and then you get into a little loop of you're tired all of the time. You have pain. You are not physically fit, and you have all of these high cortisol levels. And that all contributes to the pain that you have then. And I think if you're getting proper rest, if you're eating a healthy diet and getting all of the good vitamins and minerals in, and you are doing some exercise, it definitely helps to reduce those levels of cortisol and get you at least to a state where you can manage that pain better by doing things like exercise. And I mean,
would you
laying in
sorry, carry on, CJ. Sorry,
I see this a lot in the hospital. You know, you get patients or critically ill patients that lay in bed for a long time, you know, and at a stage that contributes to their pain, you know, laying in the same position all of the time, even moving around your bed, but laying on a surface the whole time definitely contributes to that body aches and pains. And getting up and moving around, it makes it, I can't tell you what a big difference that makes. And I always used to tell my patients, you know, and they're like, oh no, they don't want to get up, they don't want to do this. And I thought, like, let's just move around. Let's just see if you don't feel better after we've done our little exercises, you can get into bed and I won't bother you for the rest of the day. And getting them out of bed and moving around in the ICU or in the ward, wherever they are. And when they get back and they sit in the chair, but they already feel so much better because it helps with circulation. You get the circulation moving again. The muscles are moving. It helps deep. The lungs are, you're breathing better. It makes a huge difference in their pain management. And I think that's definitely one of the things that people often forget about is just that physical aspect of it. Yes, they have pain, but moving around, it definitely helps.
Yeah. Lee, what? I mean, you're a very active person. I'm a bit stuck, and I've lost Tracy, who normally gets me unstuck. Forgive me, Matthew. That's absolutely coming back to the kinds of. Okay, help me with this. Types of exercise that would apply to somebody that's really ill. Ideally, there's 4 types of exercise, but obviously kind of just basic movement. But optimally, what kind of exercise? Are you talking about walking a long time? Are you talking about just moving around? And obviously, it's in relation to the abilities of a patient or a loved one, but ideally, to get rid of that cortisol, to make a person feel better, which is the best form of exercise? And I don't mean like running or cycling or something, but I mean, is it cardiovascular? Is it working the muscles?
Cardiovascular,
basic cardio.
Yeah, cardio, like getting the heart and the blood pumping. You know, blood, as you know, reaches every part of our body, and things like active. So in nursing school, we learned about active and passive exercises. So when a patient's laying in bed, often, it's not realistic for you to expect them to walk from the ward all the way to the reception area and back, or, take a small sprint around the ward. So just having an accompanied walk for a small distance a few times a day. Doing things like laying in bed and helping them just move their muscles. Because as our muscles contract and relax, it helps with circulation. So it moves blood in and out of the muscle. Same with their legs, pulling their legs up and down, moving them around, deep breathing exercises. So you have big blood vessels that sit in your chest, and doing deep breathe exercises helps with the movement and the circulation of the blood. And that is, so it doesn't necessarily have to be very tiring or a high exercise or high tolerance exercises. It can be as simple as just taking the arms and moving it up and down for 10, 15 times, and then letting them take a rest, and then doing it again for about 2 minutes.
Yes.
And often when muscles don't get used, they get stiff, So if they don't have that exercises, the body gets sore, that it contributes to their pain, and the muscle gets stiff, and that's very painful.
I suppose you've seen a lot of atrophication of muscles. There's a question I'm very scared to ask, because it just opens a door on a world that I don't know anything about. When you've got to deal with a loved one or a patient that actually is okay, old people, sometimes they just stop eating because they want to go, and there's a certain bravery and a certain mindset to that. I'm sure that's very difficult if you're caring for a loved one. How do you, as a caregiver, not get overwhelmed for that? Because I can't relate to that experience. What do you do to not feel overwhelmed in that case? Because that's lots of hard work, I'm sure.
You broke up there for a second.
Sorry, when you're dealing with a patient or a loved one that is not having a will to live anymore, that's not something I had to deal with, because the person that I took care of went out raging against the dark. She wasn't prepared to die, and but there are people that want to, they want to welcome the end. They want to go. How do you, as a carer, deal with that kind of exhaustion?
So we need to create, I think we need to, that's a very, very difficult question to answer. I think it goes back.
You've had to face that, I'm sure.
Yes. Now, I've often encountered somebody that's
a horrible question, and it's a horrible question, and I'm sorry to ask her.
No, that's absolutely fine. I think we need to just, one of the most important things is creating an environment that's safe for them. I think often as soon as somebody starts exhibiting or shows thoughts of, they don't have the will to live anymore, we often try to encourage them instead of listening to them, because we are not the person at that moment fighting that battle. We are not the person experiencing the pain or having to deal with the reality that the life that they have lived for the past 20, 30, 40 years might potentially come to an end. So I think creating an environment where it's safe for them to express those fears and express the fact that they do, like, they feel that they don't have the will, and listening to them and taking that information, and just listening. Because we often, I mean, as soon as somebody starts talking about those things, we're like, oh no, don't worry, you need to do this, and you need to feel better, and that often doesn't help. It doesn't. It's the worst thing. It's the worst thing to do. It's the worst thing you can do. Just listening to them, and then finding some way where you can encourage them, and it obviously it differs if it's somebody who has a good prognosis that potentially might get better, versus somebody who has a poor prognosis who's just living out the end of their life. And I think it's very important and I see this often in the ICU setting, is we as family members and loved ones, we need to learn when to let go. Because
you've answered a question that I didn't have an answer for. I didn't expect. You've got to listen, and that's something I had to learn to do, which I see Lee is also echoing my this realization from you. You have to listen, because that's what to do. Lee, sorry to interrupt your thread. I'm just going to come back to you, CJ. Lee, let's just get you maximized. Did you find you had to develop, like I did, a skill to acknowledge, just to listen?
Yes. Yeah, that's very important. We have to think.
I'm not good at that.
Yeah, you have to listen to what your loved one or the patient has to say of how they feel. Like Matthew, he expressed that and I had to listen to him and not say, yeah, but you will be okay, knowing that he's not going to be okay. And had to be there for him and just listen and just support him in his fear that he had, instead of saying, no, you will be okay, because we knew that he's not going to be okay. And I just had to be there for him to get through that. And I told him, I'm also scared, and it's okay to be scared. It's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's not easy.
Well said.
That is
very true. It's okay. It's very good that you. Oh, it's very great that you just mentioned that it's okay to be scared. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most difficult situations anybody has to deal with, and that's the fact that we're dealing with the potential of death, the end of life, and
Yeah.
it's okay to be scared. It's you've never experienced something like that in life before. It's an unprecedented situation, and it's okay to be scared. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, definitely.
There's two more questions I want to put to CJ, but the one is, you kind of covered it already, is like the environment that you've got to create. I mean, you work in a hospital and you don't have a hell of a lot of control over that. Hospitals have protocols and they sort of all look the same and stuff, but is there anything inside of that rather sterile environment that you can do to personalize it for a loved one, on your side? What do you do? Or do you just make it, even just to make it sweet for yourself as the professional caregiver? I'm more interested in that. How do you make your workspace human for you?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So, yeah, like you said, it's a very clinical environment, very cold and sterile, and it often doesn't feel very, healing. There's always bells going off, alarms, people moving in and out. So it's not always. We would like to think it's the best place for healing, but it's not always. And so one of the things that we often did with patients in the ICU, you'd at the foot of their bed, we'd ask family members to bring pictures of all of their loved ones, children, family members, dogs, and we create a little collage at the foot of their bed so that it's always there for them to see, and it made a big difference, because as soon as the patient wake up, they're like, oh, look, there's my family, there's my dog, there's my aunt, there's my grandmother, there's my all of those people. And something that I often did we're working in the ICU environment, I tend to be a bit more lenient with visiting times. Hospitals can be quite strict with visiting times, and it's sometimes a bit unnecessary. I think the more time the patient spends with their family member, the more emotionally enriched they become. They feel better after that encounter, because being in a hospital, you're dealing with strangers, you're dealing with people that you don't know, and they're doing all of these invasive things to you. And I think just seeing their family already makes such a big emotional difference. And things as simple as bringing in their own bedding from home, letting them sleep in their own pajamas or their own clothes, just takes that clinical part a better way, and makes it a bit more personal for the patient.
Okay, so you're talking about making them at home in a way, because I mean it's easy enough to do that. Well, it's not easy, nothing's easy, but it's it's less difficult to do that when you are looking after somebody in their own home.
Versus in the hospital.
I remember putting on Melanie's favorite music, which was metal, which I'm not really crazy about. But I had a joke with her about that, because Iron Maiden was the archetypal heavy metal, and she loved that. We went to see an Iron Maiden concert in Cape Town. The lead singer at the time was fighting throat cancer. And the joke for me was that cisplatin was the stuff that they put into her for her chemotherapy, and that's cisplatin, or it's platinum as far as I know. It's heavy metal in your veins and heavy metal in your ears, and iron laden. So we had a lot of laughs about that. And when she was in her last, I was playing that stuff 24/7. I'm not crazy about it. I listen to everything, but not my. I listen to everything, and there's and that, but it's not my favorite frequency. It's a very certain frequency. It goes. We pick our music. Our favorite music is around the frequency. Anyway, Matthew is asking a very important question about respite, and you were mentioning it earlier. Taking a break, taking a step backwards, and having somebody else come in. That's what Tracy did for me in terms of and friends. They come in and they take the person away, and while that person is with that person that they're taking away, or they're there for that while the visitor, you can actually go and get an hour's sleep, which is
it helps.
This is not a problem for you in the professional world because you just pass over shifts. But what would you say to a person that is not prepared for that? How do you start asking for that kind of help when you don't even know you need it?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult situation to be in because we, like you said, especially as men, we try to do everything ourselves. And especially if you're the carer of somebody that's terminally ill, you'd like to think that you are the best person for this job. I'm going to take better care of my family member than somebody else is going to. So you often tend to struggle to hand over that responsibility of care for just even a small while. And I think it all starts with the people that you find in your support, your close support group, and identifying people that you know and trust, because there's no use in handing or asking somebody to just, listen, I need just an hour break. You maybe just come and spend some time with my family member for that time. But I mean, if you have anxiety and stress about, is this person going to know this and do that and that? So I think it's about surrounding yourself with the right people. And if you're fortunate enough in your life to have good friends and good family members or have good relationships with people, that might not be as difficult as you think it is. And it's honestly as easy as just going to somebody and saying, listen, I need an hour. And just telling them, listen, could you maybe just come and help me out? And we often forget that how beneficial that is for the person that's sick as well, because you are in this company of this person so much all the time. And they often don't see, I mean, unless somebody comes to visit them, they often don't see other people, especially when it comes to close to the end of the end of life situation or time. You are the only person they see. So it often makes a big difference for them to just see a new face and see somebody and offer some new encouragement and some new conversation and a new tone of voice. And so I think it's a difficult situation because we often don't want to ask for help, but sometimes we just have to. We have to for our own well-being loved ones.
Just from listening to you now, thinking of something Lizelle said to me earlier this week when we spoke was, not all the help you get is wanted. she and I had a very similar experience with the most awful awful state hospice appointed nurses, and her experiences were mostly terrible. But I actually started using my son. I started using my son to chase them away, because when they arrived, Melanie said it was good exercise for Melanie, because as soon as they arrived, she would leap to her feet and run and hide in the bedroom, and then I had to deal with this horrible crow that came in to ask you if you well, and when you ask the person how are you feeling, no, there's nothing wrong with you, and doing all the stuff that you shouldn't. And then asking for water, they're really awful. Lizelle, I'm asking for a funny moment in getting rid of those people, because I made it a game for myself to get rid of those bloody people.
I kept having to open the door. So it was absolutely terrible. They would come once a week. The last 3 weeks of Matthew's life, they would come once a week for 5 minutes, and they say, "Oh, you're okay," when he's not okay at all. He was battling with breathing. His kidneys, his organs were failing, and this one nurse just said, "No, he's okay." And she didn't explain the procedure of what is happening to his body, that it's shutting down and all those things. She didn't say. She just said, no, he's okay. And then they leave. And they are supposed to bring his medication. Then they just don't. And I made the effort to go fetch it at the hospital at Livingston. I would phone the doctors. Yeah, I would phone a doctor, explain to the doctor what's happening, and then they would say, okay, come fetch your medication. And then I'll get it and I administer it to him.
So I think you agree with me then, Liesel, that creating an environment also involves getting rid of people, sometimes friends, sometimes good friends that actually sometimes friends need to show their grief, and then they end up crying. They end up asking you, the patient or the carer, to help them in their grief, or God forbid, even the person that's, like, got limited time, they must now counsel the friend for their grief. And actually it's better to, which is a human thing, but you kind of need to chivvy them on and get them gone, either politely or rudely. So that's also part of creating the environment, is actually getting people that are taking out of the situation and take them out of the situation, rather than they just start, like breathing up all the oxygen, the oxygen, the meaning and the happiness in the air.
Sometimes the people that come to visit are more distraught than the actual person that has the cancer or has the disease.
Yes, and their distress is actually hurtful to the person that's suffering. It's not helpful. It's not helpful.
That's
that's quite. It's quite disappointing to. The thing is, I think with these people, like nurses and people that come to, like Liesel mentioned, it's actually quite sad, and it's very true what you said, Anton. It's just about surrounding yourself with people who actually want to be there. And I mean, as with any other profession, definitely there are some nurses in the nursing profession that should, let me choose my words very carefully, but you get what I want to say, that they're not often very empathetic or show much care towards the patient nor the family members. And I think there's important information to be given to somebody who's at the end of their. I mean, one of the things at the top of my head is towards the end of life, they tend to stop eating, and we as family members, we become distressed, and we just want to feed and feed and feed. But this is a natural process because the body is shutting down, and they don't have, and they stop drinking water, and we often try to force them to eat or force them to drink water and things like that, and often we don't realize that actually does them more harm. And often people don't have that information. It's a very stressful and like anxiety provoking situation, because you're like, oh, my family member's not eating, and then you get people that come to your house but don't explain those things to you, which is quite sad.
Lee, you were going to say something, Lee?
Like the people, the nurses that come hospice, they should educate us caregivers for our loved one on the end of life, what to expect and what to do and what not to do. And that puts a lot of stress on us as caregivers for the loved ones.
What would you have, sorry, Liesel, what would you have, what kind of professional advice would you have liked to have? Because I did find it, but I had to go out of my way to get it from a much older, experienced hospice nurse. But and I got it fantastically. But what sort of advice would you have needed? This is what I think you're hitting on now. Inform you. Can you elaborate a bit more? What
Yeah.
you know what they did, you know very well what they didn't do. Now tell us what they should have done.
Yeah, they should have told me, as a caregiver, on how his body will react, that he won't eat, he won't drink, he's going to be sleepy the whole time, and he's going to be very tired, and and his organs are shutting down. What are the signs and symptoms to look for, and not to stress about that, because that's normal. It's a normal process of your body that's shutting down. And a lot of people don't know that, and it stresses them up, and they want to force that loved one or the patient to have some water, to have some food, and like CJ said, it does harm to that the patient's body. It does.
Well, I think
so they should have educated us more.
When you say do more harm to the patient's body, if you try to force them to eat when they don't want to eat, if you try to, I went and researched, must I get Melanie oxygen to stop her suffering? I was told, don't do that, it'll make her suffering worse. Which I didn't know, but fortunately I had the right person to tell me that, because we had I think that at that stage, yes, you don't want to feed them, yes, you don't, you accept that their body's shutting down, but there is still signs of terrible suffering, and you want to know what you can do. I had to watch Melanie go with renal failure. I didn't know what that was, and she had terrible breathing. She couldn't breathe, and that was, there was a medication that stopped the battling to breathe. It was Ativan, but I'm thankfully I had advice and I had access to that. But there was nothing. I accepted that there wasn't anything to do. She was going, but there was a lot of suffering that I needed help with, and I got it, thankfully, from professionals. CJ, is there the last question I've got is, how can professional caregivers support family caregivers in their journey? Now, this is a stretch, because I'm asking you now to actually, you're caring for somebody, and now I'm asking you, how would you care for family members in their journey? Like Lizelle says, you wanted information, you wanted reassurance.
I think that's
what form does that take?
One of the biggest and most important things is being there to offer up information. Being somebody that comes from a different career field, and now you all of a sudden you're encountering this person that you have to. I mean, I underwent 4 years of training to be able to take care of somebody within a hospital setting, and all of a sudden this person that's you as the family member becoming the carer has to learn it in less than a few weeks.
Yes.
So I think the most important aspect of part would be just to be able to have somebody to turn to offer advice or receive advice. When things like that happen, like, listen, their feet are swelling, is that normal? Like, is that supposed to happen? Or it sounds like they're choking. Is there something in their lungs? What's busy happening there? They're not eating. Is that normal? Because the thing is, we often try to go to the internet, but the internet is lots of people can offer up information there, and you don't know always what's reliable. So I think having somebody that can offer you reliable information or advice when it comes to caring for your loved one. So often when we see patients like that in the hospital, they always know that they can come back and ask us, give the ICU or the ward a phone call and be like, listen, I would like to speak to Sister ABC regarding this and this and this. And I must say the nurses that I know within the hospital setting are fantastic when it comes to things like that. And health information. When patients are being discharged, because if they come to the hospital for something like insertion of a chemo port, or they come for their chemo visit or radiation visit or anything like that, don't just leave them to go home and not have the information that they need. Like, make them aware that, listen, okay, so they had their chemo today. They might not eat. They might not want to drink. They're going to be very sleepy, going to be very tired. They might be nauseous. So if they this is how you can fight the nausea. This is how you can do this. This is how you can do that. So offering, for me as a healthcare worker, often working with patients, family members who are now becoming carers, I think that's the most important part, is being able to offer up that information that they would not have had access to prior to that job.
Okay. Thank you for putting it so neatly for us. I'm gonna start winding up, and I just wondered, Lee, when it comes to putting things ahead, in other words, you're an expert at that. I became one thanks to Melanie doing it, and then I followed. But now, putting things ahead, special times, special occasions. I think we had about 4 anniversaries a year of our wedding, because we didn't, and then she lived and then birthdays and such things. Incentivizing, giving, putting things ahead to live towards. Any comments about that? Family birthdays, anything?
Yeah, Matthew, he always, we met on the 16th of January last year.
Yeah.
And every month on the 16th, he would celebrate a month anniversary. And for him, it was something to look forward to every month on the 16th. And he would want to make it that special day. And just before he died, he apologized and said that he won't be able to make the last month for the celebration.
Yeah.
And
and that
it was something for him to look forward to.
And that apology is still a passion to live. I can hear that. But I can read that between I remember having a colleague at work who said he was diagnosed with cancer, and he went very quickly, pancreatic cancer. And then, of course, somebody from work phoned him and, how are you? And they try to get out of him, like, well, like, how long have you got? And he said, very chipper in that, he said, well, the doctor says I'll make it to Christmas. And he did. He did. He did. Against quite a lot of odds, because pancreatic cancer is quite fun. My Melanie made it to my birthday. My 50, I can't remember which one, something birthday, and she made it to that day. CJ, thank you so much for your insights today. I want to talk to you again, and I want to talk to you again as well, Lee. And I'm going to just run through an overview of what I'm going to do in the next episodes to come, and some of these themes are going to overlap. We've covered what caregiving is and basic misconceptions about it, that you can't do it, you can do it. And we've looked at how important listening is today. I think that's what we've covered, and not so much fixing, although the two are just as important as each other. Basic needs of caring for a carer. What I'm going to look at in 2 weeks' time is emotional challenges and how to cope with, coping strategies. Although CJ has spoken a bit about taking a step back, I want to climb into that a bit more. And going forward from that, practical support, for example, financial and legal aspects, empowering yourself as a caregiver after that through your loved one, through empowering yourself through empowering them, which is very much what I can speak to, but I hope that I know Lisa can speak to that as well. And then managing stress, nutrition and wellness. I'm going to be putting up a free PDF on nutritional easy recipes for yourself and a loved one that's low residue. In other words, it's not too much roughage. but still healthy. And then, dealing with difficult conversations in the 7th one, and then moving forward, after that. And that's an overview of the series I'm planning to present. And I will be posting free resources. I'm going to find out a little bit more what Matthew said about ICASTs, and versions of ICAST that might be available for the public. But further than that, I'm looking forward to speaking to both of you again. I'm sorry we lost Tracy. Tracy is actually works for a book distributor, and she's very invested in books like you were mentioning, marketing books and seeing them sold, like you were mentioning, CJ, about Cancer for Dummies. It's kind of such a in-your-face kind of a thing. I wouldn't have imagined Cancer for Dummies would be, but I would want to read it because it seems to sort of be making light of, like a terrible thing, but in a for a serious end, and that's marvelous. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for the comments. For those that joined us, thank you very much. I'm gonna say goodbye to all of you, and I'm gonna end the stream with Gino's help. Hopefully, it's not too untidy. He's supposed to be playing the Every Day is a Miracle song. He's playing one of my songs, which he's only doing that because he's on the drums. So anyway, thanks very much again, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lee.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When my precious Melanie became critically ill from terminal cancer, to be brutally honest,